economist in the Digital Agriculture AgTech and AI for Ag team of the World Bank, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you for joining our webinar, ePhyto for Smarter Trade, Unpacking Digital Phytosanitary Certificate. This is our 108th webinar in the What's Cooking learning series, in which we invite innovators, thought leaders, and digital technology providers to share their knowledge and innovation that can transform agri-food global system. Over the last couple of years, we hosted 108 webinars that were attended by over 15,000 professionals globally, and we are sharing with you the link to our YouTube channel. Today, under the thematic area of digital trade and digital traceability, we have our webinar in which we will explore the recent report done by the FAO and EBRD colleagues investing in trade digitalization, the case for ePhyto. The report that explores economic and trade impacts of the ePhyto certificates for plant and plant products trade. Once we advertised the webinar, I received multiple emails showing interest in the topic, timeliness of the topic. So I'm very much looking for a productive discussion today. And we have a great lineup of speakers. And before we proceed, I would like to mention a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I would ask for everyone to stay on mute to reduce the background noise. Second, we will have a Q&A session after the speakers at the end of the webinar. However, I would kindly ask the participants to add their questions in the chat so that the speakers can address those questions either during the Q&A session or in the chat after their presentations. We usually get more questions than we can handle in the Q&A session. So this is an opportunity for all of your questions to be answered. To the speakers, a kind ask to stay on time. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers, and I would like to make sure that everyone has sufficient time to make their presentations. And a couple of words on the structure of the webinar. So we will start with the opening remarks from the representatives of the FAO, EBRD, and the World Bank. We will then proceed to the presentation of the report by the FAO colleagues, followed by the interventions from 3 of the discussants. And then we'll have the Q&A session and the closing remarks. With this, one more thing. When introducing the speakers, I'll just state the name and the title, and then my colleague Sunil will add their bio in the chat, and then we'll also have the bios available in the webinar announcement. So with that, let me introduce to our virtual stage our first speaker, Ekaterina Krivonos, Chief for the Latin America and the Caribbean Service at the FAO Investment Center. Katya, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Katerina and colleagues. I'm here in my capacity as, I'm the Service Chief for Latin America and the Caribbean, but actually currently I'm also working with my colleagues present here who actually prepare these reports, and these colleagues work in the region that is Europe, Central Asia, Near East, and North Africa. So just to clarify, we're many regions. Colleagues, thanks so much for the invite, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I think we are all gathered on our side, at least from FAO, because investments and trade really go hand in hand. Because predictable trade rules and well-functioning agreements, they do help to facilitate trade across borders. And at the same time, investing in critical infrastructure and institutional capacities make trade flow in practice. So today we focus on agri-food trade, and specifically on how digital technologies can facilitate it. The discussion is particularly timely. As we all read in the news, global trade is actually becoming more and more unpredictable, more and more uncertain. For example, the WTO often reports that there is a sharp rise in global tariffs implemented by many countries, and that contributes to a volatile and unpredictable global trade environment. Moreover, the average tariffs on agriculture remain significantly higher than tariffs on industrial goods. And when barriers rise, the importance of trade facilitation actually becomes more important than ever. For agribusinesses to thrive, an enabling environment is essential, and that requires public investments in systems that benefit both importers and exporters, producers and consumers, all along the value chain. And one of the most cost-effective public investments that we can do to stimulate trade, growth, and jobs is actually in digital public infrastructure, because such investments will enhance transparency, predictability, efficiency, and safety of agri-food trade. WTO, you may know, the trade facilitation agreement that was negotiated and signed more than 10 years ago, it can reduce significantly trade costs by 14% globally. That's what the WTO estimates. And digitalization of trade procedures, including sanitary and phytosanitary measures and certificates, play a central role in this effort. So why we in FAO work on this with the BRD? It's because we believe that transparent and well-functioning markets are fundamental for food security, for ending hunger, for ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all, and achieving food security and improved nutrition. And this means on our side that we work on strengthening market transparency, improving information systems, analytics, and innovative technical approaches. So this webinar is the result of close collaboration with our two major partners. So thank you to the World Bank for organizing it. We work together every year for the last 6 years, and to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, because our team will present the work conducted jointly between EBRD and FAO and ePhyto, and how it helps to facilitate safe and efficient agri-food trade. Back to you, Katerina.
Thank you, Katerina. And now over to our representative from the EBRD, Iride Sekachi. She is the head of the Corporate Sector Advisory at the EBRD. Over to you, Iride.
Thank you to both of you, Katerina. Good morning or good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be part of this event. So thank you very much for your invitation. I'm Iride Sekachi. I'm working in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in the Food and Agribusiness team. We invest around 1 billion each year across the agri-food value chain, from primary agriculture to retail in more than 35 countries. As a private sector focused international development bank, our mandate is clear: strengthen competitiveness, resilience, and food security through both investment and policy engagement. Today, digitalization is central to delivering on this mandate. For over 30 years, we are partnered closely with the Investment Center of the FAO, and this joint study is a strong example of that collaboration. It quantifies the economic benefits for government and agri-food businesses of shifting from paper-based phytosanitary certificates to digital or ePhyto systems, particularly in the fresh food sector. Importantly, this research focuses on key countries in the BRD regions. These are Egypt, Serbia, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. Why we choose these countries is because trade in plant products is highly significant across these markets. Many are major grain, oilseeds, or horticultural exports and importers. This study allows us to clearly quantify what digital phytosanitary certification can mean for businesses operating in these trade corridors. And you will see from the presentations, but the findings are really compelling. Across countries, despite structural differences, digitalization delivers lower administrative and transaction costs, faster, more efficient export procedures, greater transparency and flexibility in trade systems, and in short, ePhyto system reduce friction in cross-border trade. The impact goes well beyond efficiency. The strong evidence generated through this study directly supports policy dialogue. For example, in Ukraine, it contributed to accelerating the decision to begin implementing ePhyto for trade, a concrete and encouraging outcome. And this is only the beginning. As more countries join the global ePhyto system, the network effect and the quantifiable benefits will continue to grow. This initiative builds on our broader work in digital agriculture, including precision agriculture in Ukraine's grain sector and digital innovation in Turkey. Across all this effort, the direction is clear. Digital transformation is no longer optional. It is essential for competitive and resilient agri-food systems. Today's report reflects the shared commitment of the FAO and the BRD to advancing practical, evidence-based digital solutions across agri-food ecosystems. I would like to sincerely thank all the colleagues and partners from the FAO who contributed to this important work, and I hope it will be useful for all of us in this event to foster a real good discussion on digitalization and trade. And with that, I really look forward to hear from our FAO colleagues who will take us deeper into the finding on this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome Anup Jagwani. He is the Senior Manager for Solutions and Impact for Farming and Agribusiness Department of the World Bank. Anup, over to you.
Thank you, Katerina. Much appreciated and happy to be here with all of you. Many of you know that agriculture is the least digitized sector and amongst the various sectors. And so focusing on this is an important part for the World Bank Group as a whole. And many of you know the bank and IFC teams have come together now to really focus on this. It's an important pillar in AgriConnect. Many of you have heard about AgriConnect. It's one of the 6 scalable solutions is ag technology, and it's cross-cutting, and we know that. And today's webinar on ePhyto for smarter trade, unpacking digital phytosanitary certificates to discuss is timely study from FAO and EBRD. So, and thank you for that collaboration. The findings and implications of the report strongly complement the World Bank's initiative on AgriConnect, as I mentioned, with the pillar, right, and focus on smallholder and farms and creating jobs. Jobs is central to the World Bank Group. Our President Ajay Banga had committed also to double our investments in the agri-food space by 2030 to 9 billion as a World Bank Group, and mobilize an additional 5 billion, which would help in scaling solutions. So this focus on scaling is not possible with without some of the solutions that we are presenting today, which essentially increase efficiency and connect markets and bring reliability to markets. So AgriConnect, as you know, aims to connect markets and agribusinesses, and ePhyto lowers that border transaction risk and delays, making it easier for exporters to access new international buyers with confidence. So ePhyto can be integrated into AgriConnect to support digital platforms, marketplaces, traceability, better buyer-seller benchmarking, and which enabling seamless verification of phytosanitary status of point of sale and reducing time to market for certified suppliers. And this is often a key barrier for several companies. By reducing documentary delays and fraud risk, and the food safety part becomes really an important piece in this industry. AgriConnect can more readily link producers to trade finance and insurance products, improving lenders' ability to underwrite agri-food exports. So as a result, integrating IPPC ePhyto solution with the World Bank Group's digital platforms, there are implications for job creation across the agri-food value chain, and reducing waste, an important piece. As we know, in the agri-food space, reducing waste becomes an extremely important piece. So, and it generates demand for new skilled positions and enables growth in trade finance and insurance. So our commitment to AgriConnect as the knowledge bank, by working closely with our clients, identifying scalable solutions. As I mentioned, this is one of those key ones, ag tech and digitization of ag. And I think it was pointed out is no longer, by Ride, that is no longer good to have, is a must have. And I would like to thank both FAO and EBRD for our long-standing collaboration to advance knowledge and learning in the global agri-food systems. And this webinar is one example of that. And we look forward to furthering our joint work around these areas of digital trade and digital traceability, among other areas. So with that, I wish everyone a great webinar ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anup. So now we'll proceed to the presentation of the report. It will be done by 3 FAO colleagues who will present the report and then relevant case studies. So the presentation will be done by Dmitro Prihodko, who is the senior economist at the FAO Investment Center, and Christelle Odd from the FAO Investment Center, and Evgenia Koroleva from the FAO. Colleagues, over to you. I'll let you coordinate the transitions across the 3 parts of your presentation. Thanks. And while you're uploading the presentation, a reminder to the participants to please leave your questions in the chat. Thanks. Dmitro, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Thank you very much, colleagues, for a nice introduction. And let's start with the presentation of report. So we will split the presentation in 3 parts. Let's start with the next slide. Next. So first of all, what is ePhyto? We're talking about it today. Maybe before talking about ePhyto, let's talk for a second about what is Phytosanitary certificate. Phytosanitary certificate is the official document issued by the National Plant Protection Organization of the exporting country to attest to the national plant protection of the importing country that the product meets phytosanitary requirements. In simple terms, it means that the product is free from harmful pests. So the electronic phytosanitary certificate is an XML version of this certificate, which is exchanged between the countries instantly. It is issued in line with the International Standard for Phytosanitary Measures number 12, which regulates how regular phytosanitary certificates should be issued. So I will, this report continues our joint work with EBRD on facilitating trade digitalization. And it is the first comprehensive report that quantifies assessments of costs and benefits and the impact of phytosanitary certificates on trade. Next slide. The electronic phytosanitary certificates entered this world in December 2017. It was a major effort by our colleagues from the International Plant Protection Convention, as they were supported by major donors and partners, including the World Bank, the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, and others. So from December 2017, when the certificates were introduced, until December 2019, the adoption of the phytosanitary certificates and their use has saw somewhat sluggish response. But with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, things rapidly changed. So the value of the value of trade in plant and plant products covered by the phytosanitary certificates, specifically, and we assessed it as phytosanitary certificates issued by countries that were connected to ePhyto solution, as well as importing countries that were connected to the hub. So the value of trade suddenly jumped from nearly zero to about $4-6 billion per month. And ever since, what we've seen with our result, with our analysis, is that the value of trade covered by electronic phytosanitary certificates has increased, mostly thanks to the expansion of ePhyto to new member countries. So by September 2020, let's say from March 2023 to September 2023, electronic phytosanitary certificates covered about $8 to $10 billion of trade in plant and plant products per month. So if we take in calendar year terms, in 2023, phytosanitary certificates covered estimated and staggering $90 billion of trade. Next time, So no matter how staggering these $90 billion per year were, the total trade in plant and plant products that should have been covered by phytosanitary certificates in our estimates reached about $700 billion in 2023. So as we can see that at this point in calendar year 2023, phytosanitary certificates covered about 12% of trade in plant and plant products. And by the end of our period of analysis, we got to the point of about 17% of global trade in plant and plant products covered by the ePhyto solution. As we can see, there is still tremendous room for growth. Since we stopped our analysis, there were few other major exporting countries that joined. For instance, Ukraine joined later, and Kazakhstan and some of the other major exporting countries. With that, let me turn to my colleague Anne-Christelle Ott. Over to you for the next slide, and then to Evgenia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dmitro. So moving on from those stylized facts on ePhyto, let's look at the in-depth analysis on the economic impact of the IPPC Phyto solution. So we conducted that analysis from two different angles. A first angle is country level, where we consider how adopting the ePhyto solution impacts different parties in a country. So for example, how does it impact agribusinesses? How does it impact national plant protection organizations? And for these parties, what are the additional costs and benefits or savings associated with switching to the ePhyto solution? In the second angle, there was an econometric analysis that uses global trade data to assess the effect of ePhyto use on bilateral trade. In other words, what happens to trade between two countries when they both adopt the ePhyto solution? So I will talk about the first analysis first, the country-specific cost-benefit analysis. As Iride mentioned, it covers 4 countries in the EBRD region of operation. At the time, only Uzbekistan had adopted the ePhyto solution. As Dmitro mentioned, Ukraine has since joined. Serbia is now testing, and Egypt is still unregistered. The analysis is based on extensive interviews of exporting agribusinesses and national plant protection organizations in the assessed countries. It focuses on fruit commodities, and the specific fruits depend on the countries and their export baskets. And in the case of Ukraine, we also looked at cereals because it's such a major export commodity. The analysis compares a situation where the country uses paper certificates to a situation, theoretical in fact, where the country switches to digital certificate through the ePhyto solution. And so we're able to compare the cost of issuing the certificate in both situations. The analysis includes a range of actors and perspectives. So for example, the National Plant Protection Organization has costs associated with setting up the ePhyto solution and maintaining the ePhyto solution. It also has savings. In particular, we identified that they no longer have to print phytosanitary certificate paper forms. But in the next slides, when I'll talk about the results, I'm only going to focus on savings for agribusinesses. And the reason is because this is where the main impact was observed. So the results. Essentially, the interviews with the agribusinesses aim to assess the processes and resources needed to obtain paper phytosanitary certificates, getting these certificates to the importing country border on time to clear containers for imports. So then we could compare these costs to a theoretical situation where you use the digital certificates instead. Costs can include, for example, driving to pick up the phytosanitary certificate paper form or sending the compiled certificate by courier. Some costs apply to all certificates. So for example, driving to pick up the form. but instead some costs are unusual. So for example, think that your container might arrive at the importing country border, but the phytosanitary certificate is sent separately and is delayed, and the container has to wait for the certificate to arrive to be cleared at the importing country border. There were also situations where phytosanitary certificates have to be reissued. And while this reissue process takes place, the container is again delayed at the border. And in fact, it's those unusual costs that often added up significantly. In this first row, we see the sum of the costs that apply to all certificates plus the cost of the unusual events multiplied by the frequency of these unusual events, so the expected cost. You see they're much higher for Egypt and Ukraine in the case of cereals. This is because these were the situations where there were more likely to be either delays of the certificates or certificates having to be reissued with high associated costs. The second row shows the savings, but on a per ton basis so that they can be more easily compared. And it's basically just the first row divided by the typical volume associated to a phytosanitary certificate. And the third row shows, on average, how many phytosanitary certificates are issued by an exporting agribusiness per year. You can see that in Egypt, it's about 2,500 per year, so a much bigger volume than in the case of Uzbekistan, where it's only about 100 certificates per year. So this last row here shows the potential saving per company per year in dollars. It reaches over $200,000 in the case of Egypt because we've got a high saving per certificate and many certificates issued in a year. And instead, it's much lower in Uzbekistan, where the savings per certificate are lower, and you also have fewer certificates per year. Now, why did I say potential saving and not just saving? Because as you can imagine, if Egypt adopts the ePhyto solution, this does not mean that agribusinesses suddenly only export with ePhytos. To use ePhyto, the agribusiness also needs the importing country to have adopted the ePhyto solution. Otherwise, the company still has to use a paper certificate to clear the shipment. And this is why, if you read the publication, which I hope you will, all results are presented according to different scenarios of global ePhyto adoption. So don't worry too much about the numbers in this graph. I think what's really important here are the different scenarios. In the first series of bars here, we see the scenario called current scenario. And this is basically saying how much would each company save today if the countries that have adopted the ePhyto solution are the countries currently exchanging with it. In the case of Egypt, we can see the savings are about $80,000 per year out of the potential that was around $200,000 per year. That's because not all of the importing partners use ePhyto. In the second scenario, testing and registered, we say, okay, what if more countries join? And the countries that are likely to join first are those that are currently testing or registered. So the savings go up a bit as you can use ePhyto on a larger share of your markets. The third scenario is called Russian Federation because it says, what if Russia joins the ePhyto solution today? And it was added because it's a major market for Serbia and to a smaller extent for Egypt. So it was to assess how much savings for agribusinesses would go up in that situation. And finally, the last scenario is if all importing partners adopt and use ePhyto. And here we see that in the case of Egypt, all savings occur, and we have a saving of over $200,000 per year. Now, you can see that in the case of Uzbekistan, the savings only materialize in the last scenario, all with that $379 saving. And this is because most fruit exports from Uzbekistan travel by road and transit through countries that are not ePhyto exchanging countries. Only in the scenario all dual transit countries also use ePhyto, and the truck no longer needs to carry a paper certificate to clear the borders. In the other scenarios, you still need a paper certificate, so the savings do not take place. This last slide shows the same results, but aggregating for all agribusinesses or the full export volume of the assessed commodities. And it's just there to show how, even if the savings per certificate are not massive, when you start aggregating them for the export volumes, they really do add up. And in the case of Egypt, they reach almost $9 million per year. And in the case of Ukraine cereals, they reach almost $10 million per year. So it starts being significant. And with this, I will pass on to Yevgenia for the rest of the analysis.
Thank you, Anne-Christelle. So the second part of the report is focused on global level analysis of the impact of ePhyto on bilateral trade. And this analysis relies on three main components. Number one is the data on ePhytos exchange between country pairs provided by the IPPC Secretariat for the years from the beginning 2017, December, until the end of 2023. Second component is the bilateral trade data for plants and plant products that typically require phytosanitary certificates. We had to compile this list at the HO6 level ourselves. This is approximately 260 commodities out of 1,200 HO6 products of agri-food definition. And the third component is the gravity model, which is a standard model in global trade economics used to estimate the impact of a specific policy on bilateral trade flows. Next slide, please. So this is a standard setup for the gravity model, gravity equation. The idea for the gravity model, for those of you that are not very familiar with it, stems from the idea of the Newton's law of gravitation. Basically, two countries, two economies, they trade more, the larger the size of each economy, and also the closer the two countries are. And we use all countries in the world and selecting those that use ePhyto solution, registered and actually use ePhyto. We don't consider testing or piloting stage. And we use experts. And later on, we first use the aggregate levels of plant and plant products. Then we consider groups of commodities such as vegetables, cereals, fruits, and others. And as an indicator, policy indicator, to measure the impact of ePhyto solution on trade flows, we use the number of certificates ePhytos basically exchanged bilaterally. So an exporter that uses ePhyto sends a certain number of certificates to an ePhyto using importing country. And as an estimation method, we use PPML, pseudo maximum likelihood estimation. Next slide, please. And finally, let me move quickly to the results of the gravity estimation. Global level trade analysis confirms that ePhyto solution has a positive impact on bilateral trade flows between countries that use the system, largely driven by the reduced transaction costs. However, this increase in exports is not immediate, and it occurs only after the exchange of ePhytos reaches a certain threshold. The minimum number of ePhytos needed to generate a measurable positive effect on trade between two trading partners is 57 per year, minimum, for all plants and plant products at the aggregate level. This threshold is well below the number of certificates that countries typically use, and those countries that go full scale on ePhyto, on using ePhyto, reaches thousands of certificates. And also then we run the same analysis for the broad groups of commodities, such as vegetables, fruits, cereals. And we find that more perishable commodities require smaller number of ePhytos exchanged to start observing the positive impact of exports. For example, fruits would need 45 certificates, ePhytos, and vegetables would require a minimum 30 certificates per year to realize trade enhancing effect. And cereals, due to their bulk and mostly non-perishable nature, they require approximately 112 ePhytos to achieve a positive trade impact. And overall, these findings suggest that countries can prioritize the introduction of ePhyto solution to high-value perishable products, such as fruits, vegetables, during testing in pilot stages, in order to maximize the benefits of the ePhyto use. For more details, I would invite you to download the report by scanning the QR code on the screen. You'll find a lot more descriptive statistics, outcomes, and conclusions on the ePhyto use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dmitro and Christelle and Evgenia for the presentation. We have some of the questions coming in. So you can address those. We can also address those during the Q&A session. We now have 187 participants. So once again, a warm welcome to everyone. We will move on now to our discussants, who will talk about the applications of the report in the context of different countries, or in the case of Katarina Null, in the context of our work in the IFC and the World Bank. So with that, let me invite Rose Souza Richards. She is Phytosanitary Affairs Manager at the International Seed Federation, and she will talk about how ePhyto affects the seed sector specifically. Dear Rose, over to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's so nice to see all of you. I will start by sharing my presentation. I'm not sure what's happening here.
If you have any troubles, we can present those on our side and then just switch across the slides.
It's interesting that I cannot see anything.
Sunil, would you like to go ahead and present?
But before I could, and now I can now. Just a minute.
So Rose, Sunil is presenting, so you just can tell him to move from one slide to another when you're ready.
Oh, I thought that I was able to share from my side, but is it okay if I can try again? Because I've done a slightly small alteration from my side. This is why I would have preferred if I could.
Yes, sure, let's try.
Okay.
Sunil, if you could please stop sharing. Thanks. Okay, looks like it's coming up. Good. You're good to go, Rose. Thanks.
So, slideshow. Can everybody see okay?
Yes, can see, can hear. Perfect.
Thank you so much, and apologies for this little hiccup. So really what I would like to unpack for you all is what ePhyto has been, how us as the representative of the private sector, not only from the seed sector, but also from the private sector as a whole, when my position as the chair of the ePhyto Industry Advisory Group, and how important the work of what FAO has done with this report as well. I will touch base a little bit. What ePhyto has really changed in practice actually has been operationally, the certificate has become more structured data that can be transmitted, validated, and received automatically. For the NPPOs, for the board agencies, what we have is a faster issuance, transmission, and receipt of the Phytosanitary certification, meaning fewer manual data entry points and re-entry points in the case of when you need to reissue, better traceability, reduce of fraud and loss risk, and of course, less for the companies and for the logistics as a whole, less courier time, less time when we issue Phytosanitary certification, which sometimes it could lead to 30 days, shorter clearance and safety windows, lower demurrage and storage risk, and improve predictability for time-sensitive shipments. So what changes in the workflow? From paper handling to data governance, we have a much more defined data rules. We have a secure connectivity, operational readiness, and exception management. So replacements, withdrawals, and non-compliance has been much more updated. Why ePhyto matters for the international seed movement? I am representing the International Seed Federation. We do represent the international seed sector. Our members represent over 95% of the movement of seeds across the world, as we have most of the seed companies are our members. Seed trade is a high frequency. It happens all the time. It is at the international level. is very time sensitive because seeds is perishable, and is compliance intense because seeds can be over-regulated. There is a reducing on paper failure. This is what we have observed: loss, damage, delay certificates, because this protects the legitimate trade and planning cycles. That means reducing all this paper failure. You can plan in the cycles. You can guarantee that the farmer somewhere in the world will receive its seeds at the right time and will be able to plant and will be able to provide food across many different people. Digitize, standardize information improves predictability for the inspection, testing, and treatment coordination, faster clearance support, seasonal windows, and of course, just-in-time delivery to production sites, which is what I just said, and better integrity and traceability reduce fraud risk and strengthens the risk management. The bottom line for us as industry is that the ePhyto is not just an IT tool. It is a trade facilitation and compliance tool that lowers friction, improves service levels, and helps keep plant health protection effective. 2 participation pathways. We have the national system directly connected to the hub. We have the GENS, the generic national system, web-based national system, 1 exchange mechanism. Within the hub, we have the NPPO, who issues the Phytosanitary system, connects to the hub via secure exchange, best for countries which has a mature IT capability, or in the case of the GENS, countries without the national ePhyto system, manage the ePhytos via the IPPC, but lower upfront investment. Both systems connected to the ePhyto hub. What is the key point here? Harmonized message format plus security exchange, guaranteeing a faster, more reliable cross-border processing. When we think about the implementation pathway, what it takes to go live, think process plus people plus platform, not just technology. Decision and government is the first thing. What is the mandate, the ownership, budget, stakeholders? Second, legal. How many times we have seen that one of the challenges that the legal issues needs to be much more clarified to allow the exchange of electronic format for the Phytosanitary certification. Data retention, very important that the data retention exists because commodities such as seeds and cotton, they are moving from the same original lot for many years. Technical onboard, which it is the platform that you're going to be using, which kind of connectivity, and security. Security is very important. So all the NPPOs need to take that into consideration. Operational readiness, which are the standard operating procedures, how the training will be done. And then last but not least, trade partner rollout, always working together with the private sector, public and private sector, to make sure that the rollout of such an important tool like the electronic Phytosanitary certification is done in a way that all the parties are working together and very clear which are the outcomes and where there is all the pitfalls and issues that can be easily being transparent to each other. This morning, I just done a presentation on ePhyto in the Philippines, where they are doing very successfully the implementation of the electronic Phytosanitary certification. Lessons learned from the implementation support. So what consistently accelerates adoption? What are the enablers? A strong NPPO ownership and clear cross-agency roles, early engagement with industry, practical testing with real shipments. This is vital to be able to make sure that the system works. Clear exceptional rules. When it needs to do replacements, withdrawals, phase rollout is started with key corridors. Some common blockers that we have noticed. It's not just an IT project only frame. It is much more than that. It needs to be involved with everybody, all the parties, and needed to have a very strong support from the government. Fragmented responsibility sometimes across the different agencies can be an issue, can be a blocker. Unclear legal recognition, limited capacity for help desk and training, and trade partner misalignment on secrets. So this is just some of the lessons that we learned when we were supporting the implementation of ePhyto in many different countries. One practical recommendation, build rollout around service outcomes. For example, reduce reissuing, shorter clearance time, fewer documentary non-compliance. These are incredibly important when we are moving plants and plant products across all the different countries, because what we're saying is that these are perishable commodities. They needed to be moved. They need to be moved fast, and they need to be moved securely. How to frame the value proposition? So what exactly do we need to have ePhyto? I think you don't need to say much more than some of what has already been highlighted and has been highlighted for quite some time. But I would like to just highlight a few points here. It is a trade facilitation, fast transmission and receipt, reduced documentation delays, better predictability, cost reduction has already been shown that lower courier and reissue costs, and we have the report here that was already been presented, lower risk of clearance delays, reduce manual processing effort, and taking the data exactly that was already presented by Dimitri and his team is the evidence that we have where the ePhyto case studies has already have specific numbers. For the case here, 3.7 to 83.5 US dollar savings per shipment, and this is range across fruit cases. So it's very important that this is highlighted over and over again, that we wanted to see more and more countries taking electronic phytosanitary certification, but digital tools as a whole to be able to enable more and more trades across the world from plants and plant products. For the risk management side, it reduced frauds and loss risk, improved traceability, and audit, and has a better data quality for controls. So it is a quick win. And I think that this is something that the private sector has already been supporting, will continue to be supporting going forward. Some of our priorities and what we have been repeatedly asking, working together with all the different governments, is a stable, predictable operational process, a clear go-live sequence with the trading partners, interoperability with single windows and customs and border platforms, visibility, consistent data quality, and harmonized interpretation of certificate elements. We just come into the finalization of a project within the STDF, it's PG 755, where we have been supporting a number of countries on the implementation of ePhyto. And I think this is what is really important. By working together, having this combination of the private and public sector, we can support the rollouts of very important tools that can facilitate trade and can facilitate the movement of plant and plant products. And that can guarantee much, much better food security across many different countries. Some of the recommendations for a smart investment in rollout, implementation design, treat ePhyto as a cross-border service transformation, prioritize readiness and sustainability, use corridor-based rollout, starting with high-volume patterns and commodities, and embed measurements, baseline paper pain points, track the improvements, and by tracking the improvements, you can make sure you have an eye on the system and that also you be able to decide on which kinds of upgrades, updates, or enhancements, because this is always going to be necessary to make sure that the system continue working. An ecosystem and alignment align with broader trade digitalization, yeah, including then as part of the single windows, as customs workflows, and this is what we're seeing more and more now. Engage industry early and continuous as we are doing all the movement of all the commodities. Plan for exceptions. What will happen when there is a withdrawal, a replacement? What are the contingency procedures? And coordinate regionally where possible to avoid an uneven adoption. And when there is an uneven adoption on the region, it then can start to create barriers, and some of these barriers are trade. This is just some of the lessons that we learn through some of the implementation support that we have been provided to a number of countries since 2020. And then just a snapshot from Colombia on a webinar that we done in October 2021 of some of the progress and lessons report was that it took them approximately 4 years of operational experience with inspecting users to be able to start to have this socialization of the process. They needed to do a lot of parallel paper and ePhyto during the transition, but then the objective has always been to remain completely paperless. In the case of the Costa Rica, they had some issues with partner coordination and formal acceptance and recognition, but they were very successful to have some partner states with some countries such as US, Argentina, Chile, and they were testing also with Mexico, New Zealand, EU, and Korea. So just some snapshots of some of the lessons that we've done. Why does affect the international seed movement? Because ePhyto can help to reduce trade frictions and costs, can strengthen phytosanitary assurance and trust between the different NPPOs, can enable risk-based controls and a smooth end-to-end clearance, builds a foundation for a broad trade digitalization. Which are our priorities as part of the IG? Interoperability at scale, avoid multiple portals, but enable system-to-system exchange, reliability and contingency, end-to-end adoption, and clarity and discipline on data requirements to prevent unavoidable friction, facilitating trade and movement of plants and plant products, guaranteeing support food security across the different countries. Practical lessons learned: pilot a corridor first, then scale up, run your UAT with real users and realistic shipments, treat as a process transformation, align early with the customs and borders, and it is a trade impact that requires scalable. And this is what it was presented on the report, measurable boost after approximately 57 ePhytos per year. So then really, this is just some of the lessons that we've done. We are, as the private sector, very supportive of the implementation of ePhyto, will continue to be, and it's an absolute pleasure to have here. And thank you so much for watching my presentation.
Thank you very much, Rose, for this practical presentation. And it addresses some of the questions we had in the chat already from the participants on what it takes to implement and adopt ePhyto in the countries. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for staying on time. We will now move to our next discussant, Islam Abuelela. He's international expert in plant health and regulatory affairs, and he will talk to us about the losses due to the paper certification for agribusinesses in Egypt. Islam, over to you.
Thank you, Katrina, and thanks for all for inviting me to be here. It's a great honor and privilege. And I'm going to be very quick in order to save the time, as most of main points are already mentioned about save and losses and so on, but I would like just to highlight some of the technical points. So the main theme of today is that we need to have an answer after our webinar today. Is the ePhyto a critical strategic necessity, or it's kind of luxurious option? Because we need to find out how to move forward. So just to cut a long story short, it's a matter of harmonization. So as already mentioned by everyone, we have what we call the International Standard for Phytosanitary Measures, ISPMs. And I would like just to highlight that ISPM number 12 has been recently modified in order to incorporate all the evidences of adoption of ePhyto by the member countries. So why ePhyto? Also, I would like to highlight again, as already mentioned, Katrina, about the facilitation agreement of the WTO and the ratification of the agreement, and moving forward with paperless trade. We need just to highlight that most of the non-compliance indication or rejections came from documented checks, not about the presence of harmful organisms, but there has been increased frequency of number of rejection due to the finding of document errors or inadequate additional declarations and so on. So to cut a long story short about the financial or the importance of ePhyto in terms of the benefits, we can just do a quick categorization of the benefits as economic benefits or financial benefits, institutional benefits, and social benefits as well. And beneath the social benefits, we can find the environmental benefits, talking about the carbon footprint, talking about saving some of forests in order to save paper and documents and so on. So the let's say that the data already presented by everyone in the report. However, I would just like to highlight the topic of categorization of benefits of ePhyto. So as part of the participant, we're wondering about the number of countries on board. So right now we have almost 148 countries on board do the exchange. As per last year, 2025, 2.2 million phytosanitary certificates were exchanging in electronic format. We have monthly around 250,000 certificates to be shared within the contracting parties. However, the most important part here is to see the region of Africa, that there are many countries in the testing phase right now, and there are a lot of work to be done in the African continent in order to move forward with using gems as an option for the ePhyto. So in terms of the implementation roadmap, we as the ePhyto steering group and the ePhyto manager right now, Gianluca Nuzzo from the IPPC and UNICC, have discussed about moving from the reactive to proactive steps in order to have the implementation package and the implementation monitoring over the process to fine-tune the ePhyto solution, which by the way, it was an idea at Wageningen University back in 2006 and was adopted in 2016 by the project of STDF in cooperation with the International Plant Protection Convention. So moving forward with the case of Egypt, so we can see that Egypt has a steady increase of its exports of fruits and vegetables. Over 6 years, you can find almost 40 to 45% of increased rate. And between every single year, you can find 10 to 15% rate of the increase. So this means also increase of the number of phytosanitary certificates. So moving forward from almost 100,000 phytosanitary certificates per year to almost 350,000 phytosanitary certificates per year means a lot of challenges, a lot of human mistakes, a lot of using of fuel and gas and so on. So that's why Egypt started to think to be part in cooperation with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and EBRD as well to discuss about the possibilities and probabilities to be part of the ePhyto in order to just showcase these figures and numbers to the high level responsible to move forward with that. So in terms of, let's say, the phytosanitary certification in Egypt, it used to have like 8 to 10 major steps, which takes randomly 7 to 8 days. However, after our this study, we find that it will take only 1 day, from 1 to 2 days in order to have a final phytosanitary certificate. And Egypt right now is facing major challenges also after using some of high-speed boats or vessels, the rural lines between Egypt and Trieste and Italy, and also some sanctions on the couriers to Russia, so they cannot send the original phytosanitary certificates. So Egypt need to think about moving forward with the best practice in order to join ePhyto very shortly. Obviously, in terms of this is just a template of the phytosanitary certificate, the paper one, the paper-based one, so everyone can understand that it needs to be printed in a very good manner and with some of security elements and so on. So as we are speaking at the end of the day of the digitalization, so right now Egypt has also what is why Egypt is so late in adoption of the ePhyto solution, because Egypt would like to do major 2 steps. The first one is to use ePhyto as a single window with other entities like customs and so on. The other thing that Egypt has its own unique traceability system. As you can see in the presentation, you can see that we can separate between different commodities, categories like strawberries, table grapes, citrus, and so on. So we have a unique code for every single plot, which will be added into the phytosanitary certificate as a place of production site. That's why we are thinking right now about the integration of digital tools with the ePhyto solution as well. So the major challenges, speaking about or in behalf of the Near East and North Africa region, the legal framework, because we find that many countries are having, let's say, some challenges on having the updated legal framework, which shall be like in a law, and the law has to pass through the parliament and so on, just to write that we are going to adopt the phytosanitary certificate in electronic chip, the security clearances and security issues, because it was a big hassle in the region about having security clearances in order to adopt the ePhyto. Some of countries still haven't developed the proper IT infrastructure, and also the roadmap for the e-certification. And in some countries, we still, in some of African countries, we still see a lack of the interest of implementation of ePhyto because of, let's say, we can say it's due to some of human interest in that case. And at the end of the day, we still find the inadequate funds for the ePhyto implementation in some countries, and that's where we can ask the World Bank and other donors in order to get involved in these points. So for the future perspective, as said by IPPC, right now we are moving forward with inclusion of mixed commodities into the ePhyto certificates. We are also going to implement the integration with the non-compliance notification in accordance with ISPM number 13. So it will not be only electronic phytosanitary certificates, but it will be also electronic non-compliance notification. And right now, using the Plant Health Campus, which can offer different e-learning course, will be integrated also in the ePhyto. And the most important thing is to expand the hub in order to use other type of certificates, like certificates of analysis or bill of lading or whatever is going to be added to the consignment info. Thank you. And again, just would like to highlight that the International Plant Protection Convention is the only entity right now have the electronic certificates, and we are having a discussion with many other counterparts in order to move forward with having e-certificates as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Islam. And I think you touched on some of the questions that have been raised in the chat, specifically on the practical challenges for implementation and on whether AI is being leveraged in any way for the ePhyto systems. So thank you for that. There's a question from Rolf in the chat. If you could address that, I think it's a clarification question. So for you. And let me please invite our last discussant, Katerina Anul. She is Operations Officer and the lead for Global Food Safety and Food Fortification Program in the Farming and Agribusiness Department of the World Bank. And Katerina will talk about the linkages between ePhyto and food safety, food traceability, and how it relates to our work in the IFC and the World Bank. Katerina, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Katerina. Please let me know if the sound is okay.
Sound is okay.
Okay, so good day, everyone. It's always challenging to be the last discussant, especially today when the standards set by my colleagues have been exceptionally high. And I'd like to begin my part by congratulating the FAO and the EBRD teams on this excellent and very timely report, because it provides strong and valuable support for the continued implementation of ePhyto. While comprehensive assessments of the benefit of ePhyto are still ongoing, this report is among the first to present clear quantitative data demonstrating its impact, and that is particularly important for policymakers, for development partners, for investors. And at the same time, it's important to recognize that the implementation of the ePhyto has its history, and it has been supported at the global level, including by the Standard and Trade Development Facility at CDF, who funded the pilot project on implementation of ePhyto that was led by IPPC. And based on the success of this project, the ePhyto implementation was scaled up, and today, if I'm not mistaken, more than 100 countries use it. But coming back to the report, I'm especially pleased that one of the countries covered is Ukraine, my home country. And Ukraine, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Ethiopia, India, Vietnam, and Zambia are countries where our team recently assessed various components of national food systems with import and export procedures identified as one of assessment areas. And although we did not examine ePhyto specifically in our assessment, we consulted with public authorities, with regulators, with private sector stakeholders on the complexity of food import and export processes, including border inspections. And in this context, ePhyto was highlighted as an important tool for simplifying border procedures for food businesses, and particularly by reducing the time consignment spent at the border. So it was also recognized as a valuable instrument for improving the traceability of plant products, including fruits and vegetables. And there is no doubt that ePhyto has become a powerful tool for facilitating cross-border trade now. And we heard today this from the presenters. So my colleagues have already highlighted many of its benefits, including quantitative data, including exporter savings or potential exporter savings. And I would like to reinforce some of these key messages, particularly from the perspective of investors and private sector. The International Finance Corporation, a member of World Bank Group, is the largest global development institution that is focused on private sector in emerging markets and one of the world's leading investors in agriculture and food production. And as an investor, we are committed to safeguarding our investments. One of the most effective ways to do this is by supporting the creation of enabling business environment. And efficient, transparent, predictable trade procedures are essential for sustainable industry growth, competitiveness, for resilience. So this is a part of business enabling environment. For these reasons, World Bank Group, including IFC, actively promotes modern regulatory approaches and digital tools, and ePhyto is one of these important tools. From the perspective of our clients, from our task teams that are designing policy reforms and also from investment projects, ePhyto represents a practical and scalable solution that help to translate policy commitments into real improvements at the border. And let me turn now how ePhyto supports the private sector in practice. So first, ePhyto significantly improves border efficiency, because by allowing certificates to be exchanged electronically and in advance, importing authorities can verify documents before shipment arrives. That was already mentioned several times. This reduces waiting times, minimizes congestions at border posts, and accelerates clearance procedures. And as a result, exporters no longer face unnecessary delays caused by missing, delayed, or disputed paper documents, because it's also a problem. And instead, consignments can move more predictably and more quickly through inspection points. This has a direct financial impact, like faster clearance, minimize logistic holding expenses, storage costs that minimize container rental fees, and cold chain operating expenses. And for perishable food, for fruits, vegetables, even a single day that's saved at the border can make a significant difference for profitability. So in addition, import savings are associated with reduction in indirect costs as well, because digital certificates eliminate the need for exporters to travel to issuing agencies, and this also was mentioned today. Quite often, this issuing agency, they are located far from production or export facilities. For example, during a recent assessment of food fortification system in Ethiopia, we discussed with stakeholders how digitizing food standards help business avoid long journeys from remote areas. These journeys involve transportation, accommodation, meals, and also time away from work. And while the official cost of obtaining documents was relatively low, then the total expense became substantial when these additional costs were included. Although this example doesn't relate specifically to ePhyto, it clearly illustrates the significant savings that are achieved when paper documents are replaced with digital systems that can be assessed remotely. And also it eliminates many of other costs that are associated with scoring paper certificates between countries. Second, ePhyto supports risk border management, because with access to standardized digital data, and I would like to highlight standardized digital data. Authorities can more effectively identify high-risk consignment and then focus inspections where they are mostly needed. And in this case, low-risk shipments can be fast-tracked, improving overall system efficiency. A risk-based approach is a fundamental principle of any modern food control system, and it is widely applied worldwide in official control, including border inspection procedures. And ePhyto, we think, is one of the tools that support the practical implementation of this approach. Because by enabling authorities to allocate resources more effectively, more efficiently, the ePhyto reduce unnecessary checks on compliant, and then compliant operators, they also reduce their costs, and their country, they are focused on higher risk consignment. Third, ePhyto strengthens traceability and regulatory compliance. Each electronic certificate contains standardized and verifiable information of the origin, of the treatment and inspection of products. So this creates a reliable trail, digital trail from farm to the destination market. For government, it of course improves regulatory oversight, improves transparency and international credibility. For exporters, it reduces the risk of rejections, it simplifies compliance, and also it supports easier access to high-value markets. So strong traceability system are key preconditions for extending export for any countries. And it's also a precondition in integrating into global value chain. And in this respect, of course, ePhyto plays a central role and important role in strengthening national quality infrastructure and food control system and food traceability in general. Also, ePhyto adoption of harmonized terminology and international data standards simplifies tracing and tracking across borders, because ePhyto certificates are structured according to agreed global codes for countries, for commodity types, for again treatments and transport modes. So authorities and business can exchange and interpret the same information reliably and efficiently. And of course, this standardization enhances traceability, it reduces errors and supports faster, more transparent processing of consignment. Also, I'd like to highlight the important link between ePhyto, border efficiency and food safety. Plants, fruits, vegetables are highly sensitive to time and temperature. So even when farmers and exporters apply good practices and maintain appropriate temperature regimes from farm to border, long delays during inspection can seriously damage product quality, shorten shelf life, and of course increase food safety risks. So these challenges is particularly acute in developing economies where the cold storage and logistic infrastructure may still be under development. So as I mentioned, IFC invests in companies that implement good agricultural practices, improve post-harvest handling, and develop cold storage and transportation systems. These investments help extend shelf life and ensure compliance with export market requirements of the products of food, including fruits and vegetables. However, even the best production and logistics system can be undermined by long waiting periods at the border with improper cold storage infrastructure. And by reducing clearance time, ePhyto helps preserve this cold chain integrity, maintain freshness, and of course lower spoilage. And this directly translates into lower financial losses, fewer rejected consignments, and of course in higher consumer confidence. And in this case, ePhyto complements private investments in food safety and quality management system and strengthens the overall resilience of agri-food value chain. And in conclusion, from the perspective of the World Bank Group, ePhyto is a strategic investment in trade competitiveness, in regulatory credibility, in food safety, and of course in private sector development. Well, it's clear that ePhyto, with implementation of ePhyto, it's not possible to achieve all these things, but this is one of the important elements that could help to achieve the above mentioned. So once again, my sincere congratulations to our FAO and the BRD colleagues on the strong and impactful report. Our team will definitely use it in our work. Thank you. Over to you, Katerina.
Thank you very much, Katerina, for this practical insights and for your examples from the countries that you work. Very insightful, I found them. So we have about 10 minutes for our Q&A, and I would like to thank participants for the active interactions in the chat. We had quite a number of questions and answers already flowing back and forth. And if I had to sort of classify the type of the questions that are coming in, there are about 7 categories. So 3 of those, that is the spread or the adoption, geographic adoption of ePhyto across the world, I think has been answered, and Dmitro shared a link in the chat where you can see where the countries stand in terms of the adoption. Another question was on the practical challenge for the implementation of ePhyto, and I think our speakers have touched on that. So I'll consider that as a covered category. And then on the AI, Islam mentioned a little bit for the case of Egypt, unless other speakers want to add other examples. So with that, some additional areas that have been of interest to participants, I'll broadly state them, and then I'll open up the floor to our speakers to see which questions they would like to take on. So one category of question was around the costs, the upfront cost for setting up ePhyto systems in the country, and then the question on the costs in terms of the ePhyto certificate and whether there is economies of scale associated with adoption. So if you use more of those, does the cost per ePhyto certificate goes down? So there's this cost question. Another category is on digital public infrastructure. So what digital public infrastructure you need to have in place for the ePhyto implementation in the country, and how the countries can bypass the weaknesses associated with the DPIs in their countries. The third one was kind of related to digital public infrastructure, I would say, that is about the security of data. So how the ePhyto certificates are kept digitally secure. And then there was a question on the impact of the ePhyto on the local producers. Have you seen any impacts on the ground as you've been working in this area? And then somewhat related to that, from the standpoint of the size, is what is the role of smaller organizations in supporting the transition to ePhyto in the country? So how they can support, and also how can they be supported? The question from clarification question from my side. So once again, costs, DPI, security, and then impacts on the local producers. And now let me, and we have 5-7 minutes. So if you answer this, unfortunately, has to be a shorter answer, but let me see if anybody would like to come in. Dmitro, you have your hand up. I assume you want to come in? Okay, good, thanks. We cannot hear you, you must be muted.
Sorry, I was clicking on mute, but thank you, Katerina. Just quickly to thank our colleagues from IPPC's ePhyto team. In fact, Gianluca Nuzzo, manager of the ePhyto solution, who is seconded to IPPC FAO from the United Nations International Computing Center, is amongst our participants today. So he's probably the most correct person to address questions related to IT security and the others, but I'll try to touch a little bit on the costs. The costs really depend on what country chooses, on which option to introduce ePhyto the country chooses. There is a no-cost option, which is offered by IPPC, which is called GENS, generic ePhyto version. It doesn't cost anything the country to introduce except human resources time to set it up. Then, of course, there is an option which is based on the national phytosanitary exchange system. And this is, for instance, the system which Egypt, for instance, is adopting. This is the system Ukraine has just introduced. And the cost here can really vary depending what the national phytosanitary exchange system entails. So if you want to include the whole traceability system, or if you want to include analysis of laboratory tests as a precondition for issuing phytosanitary certificates, this is all going to increase the costs. So I can give just a bulk figure, but I think for the country the size of Ukraine, the cost probably exceeded $500,000 easily. So I hope at least I answered part of that question. I don't know if Gianluca can step in from the participants to complement it, but Anne-Christelle actually was the first one to share the link on ePhyto adoption amongst countries. So there was a question about red tape, and I think it's a very good question. So technically, it depends on the definition of red tape. So ePhyto as such doesn't remove the regulation behind phytosanitary certificate. It doesn't simplify it. It simply expedites the process of its issuance, and it expedites the process of replacing phytosanitary certificate in case of a need. And this is actually a very important part of savings achieved from ePhyto introduction. So in terms of smaller producer organizations, maybe I didn't get the question, but ePhyto is owned by the governments, and in a sense, there is, of course, a role that every organization engaged in trade facilitation can play, especially when it comes to popularization of the ePhyto solution, and when it comes to provision of training to the users of ePhyto solution. So I think definitely in this area, pretty much everyone, big, small, government, private, has an important role to play. I'll stop over here and turn over to other participants.
Thank you very much, Dmitro. Anybody else that would like to come in on any of the questions that we had? And I see a message from Gianluca in the chat. That's actually something I wanted to suggest, given that we are almost out of time, that after the webinar, we'll be sharing the presentations and the contact information of the presenters. So you can follow up with the colleagues on the questions you might have, and we will include Gianluca's email that he provided here if anybody has more specific questions around IT. So, and then there's some additional questions. So while we're closing in the next 5 minutes, if our dear panelists would like to take any of those, please do. And with that, let me pass on to Parmesh Shah for the closing remarks. Parmesh is the global lead for the Digital Agriculture AgTag and AI for Ag team at the World Bank. Parmesh, the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Katrina, and a warm thank you to all the participants, panelists. I think you shared your wisdom in a very short time. It's a very comprehensive topic, and it was very difficult to do it, but I think I learned personally a lot about what is happening in this field. And I think clearly what we are looking for is a more integrated solution to countries which want to enhance trade. You know, Africa has a big continental free trade agreement, and that will only work if there is huge digitalization of all the data, and all that gets digitized, and the friction gets reduced within the African countries. Within African countries itself, there's a potential to increase the trade by almost $40 billion. And we are clearly interested in developing a pan-African facility, which will allow lots of regional institutions in Africa to adopt these standards and build capacity of the countries to provide technical assistance to do that. So I think clearly both the IFC working directly with private sector and the World Bank working with public sector, World Bank would like to invest in the digital public infrastructure for traceability, food safety, and trade, digitization of that, so that the governments can invest in both the infrastructure and the policies. And IFC would like to work with the private sector companies, SMEs, and all that, and build a facility which allows them to build capacity and make the transition. So I think there is clearly this is a big product for our advisory services going forward. And I think working with the EBRD jointly on and developing an advisory and with FAO and offering that as a integrated product would be a very important thing I learned from today, that we can do that. Second thing is that ePhyto takes certain things, and I think someone had a comment on e-health and food safety and all. So China attempted something, bringing the Phyto kind of things and food safety things in one platform. And we supported a kind of a 300 million investment in food safety in China, where they integrated all that and they digitized and helped all the private sector to digitize their systems much faster. It's a kind of a one-time grant to private sector to transform their systems there. So we are looking for innovative approaches to invest, not in a piecemeal way, but if we can bring food safety and digital traceability, ePhyto, all under one platform, as was also described by others, and maybe the AI and other things can help us do that much faster rather than go one by one. So I think we would welcome any ideas that if we can pick some countries where we integrate and offer a more integrated system, and that would be quite a demand for traceability is very important. One word I didn't hear in this whole webinar, I am surprised because this is what every minister talks to me, is EUDR. Compliance to EUDR. So I think EUDR is also a very big factor because people want to export things to Europe. And I think unless we really bring a compliance system which is related with EUDR, and ePhyto also becomes part of the EUDR building blocks, it will become easier to sell this to the governments also. So I would request the panelists, we will have a second conversation with you. And I would be very interested in, because we have started working with Egypt on developing a technical assistance program on the digital and data now. And I think this topic is coming there in Egypt also. So, so I think we learned a lot. We would like to continue this collaboration. We learned a lot from the questions you have asked. So I think how can we develop a more integrated offering of advisory and investment jointly with EBRD and FAO would be something we would like to explore further with you. And warm congratulations to everyone, and thanks for all the participants who have stayed till the end and braved it. But I think there's a lot of interest in this topic. You can see from the registrations and participation, this issue is not going to go away. We'll do another one in this series. We would like to deep dive into a country example a little bit more on how a country has transformed, and we'll get the government representatives also and the private sector representatives from country to come and talk about how they are transforming their system. Thank you very much, and over to you, Katrina.
Thank you very much, Parmesh. We're at time, so let me also thank our excellent speakers for their presentations, for all their attendees who spent the past 90 minutes with us. I would like also to thank FAO colleagues, EBRD colleagues for our ongoing collaboration. We're embarking on a study on digital traceability systems, so stay tuned. We'll have another webinar around this. Overall, stay tuned for our additional webinars in the What's Cooking series. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, or good night for those for whom it's evening.